Hey everybody, welcome back to Chalkboard History. We're not going to talk about the Civil War today.
So
we probably will talk something about the Civil War.
It's all tangled up.
We're going to
together.
talk about a new tour.
Yes.
Which we just launched, called the All Men Are Created Equal Tour.
We are fast approaching the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. In fact, we've already begun commemorating some of those Revolutionary War events. Lexington and Concord back in April.
Damn rebels,
that's right.
The British are benevolent, being nice, giving us tea.
Not.
Slaves.
They're bossing us around and they don't let
Paper.
us have a say. And so we've got to do something about that. And so we go to war, first of all, just to get them to be fair with us, but clearly that's not going to work. So then we decide on independence, and we have to decide who we're going to be. So we articulate that in the Declaration. We say this is going to be a nation founded on liberty and equality. So what did the founders mean when they said all men are created equal?
Well, I think they meant exactly what they said, and that's really why we decided to launch this tour, although we've been talking about the 250th and the Declaration and the founding for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's not like the 250th just snuck up on us, those right. of us who sort of live in this world. And I've long thought that talking to guests about how the Declaration was really being debated. Mm-hmm. How all of a sudden we went from a self-evident truth about natural-born equality to, well, maybe it only means white people, mm-hmm. which is what Stephen Douglas said when he was debating with Lincoln in the late 1850s. And then Alexander Stephens actually said, no, the founders like Jefferson, they really meant there was racial equality. They were just wrong. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I read some of that years ago, and I was like, wow, at least there's some honesty. Mm-hmm. Or in Douglas's case, at least it's an honest assessment. I mean, that was his position. It only meant white people. And, Lincoln's like, nah, I'm not sure that's what it says.
Right. And John C. Calhoun took a really interesting turn in his speech when he talked about all men created equal, and he said...
He's like Emperor Palpatine in the Senate.
He should have a hood. I mean, he did have the ugly neck hairs thing going on.
Yes, when he said, but he said there were only two people ever created. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one of the reasons that I wanted to get this tour underway, and I think some of the staff were like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? There's so much politics and this and that. I think it's important because for a lot of people who are interested in the Civil War, I don't think they ever think outside of 1861 to 1865 mm-hmm. in any substantial way, but that's changing. Mm-hmm. But I think you do have to go all the way back to the beginning, because what Stephens and Douglas and Calhoun and Jeff Davis, they were making a case. They were saying things that were anathema to what the founders, right, particularly Jefferson, Adams, Franklin, those radicals in 1775, 1776, 1777. Washington comes into play, but Washington's really the military character. Mm-hmm. Those other guys are the sort of organic moral compass of what the revolution is going to be. And I think you said that, before we got to the list of grievances with the king, we declared equality, right, that's important, because the country wasn't founded just in revolution and we don't like the king.
Right.
We were making a statement to the world about why we were doing it, which is twofold. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to think, if you allow yourself, that by the 1840s and 1850s, there was a cast of characters who were actually saying the Declaration isn't important. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean what it says, because we have to justify, white supremacy.
Right. And we can't live this way unless right. this is not true.
Yeah, right. We are superior.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Lincoln is going to be...
And we are equal. Well, yeah. Not you.
Well, not me, because I'm a woman.
Me and Jay,
we're equal. And Jay are equal.
Right. But everybody else you're a secondary, and then others are like different levels.
And Lincoln's going to be that figure that really calls us back to the original intent. And he writes a letter to Joshua Speed, and I know this is one of your favorites, but he writes in that letter, we began by saying all men are created equal. And now we are saying, well, all men are created equal except Negroes. Next thing you know, we're going to be saying all men are created equal except Catholics and Jews and whatever other category you want to put in that. And he said, if that's where we're going to end up, I just soon move to Russia, where they make no pretense of equality.
He actually said Catholics and immigrants.
Immigrants. Okay, well, that's interesting, given the current.
Well,
climate.
I mean, Lincoln's acutely aware of the Know Nothing movement, which of course he's willing to dance with for a bit, but they were very anti-Catholic and very anti-immigrant, and he is. He's pointing out the sort of hypocrisy of it all. That if this is how we started, how are we descending
into this
sort of fragmentation where now it's just white Europeans? So what's a white European? Is that a Russian? Are they Europeans?
You start Irish, the Italians. Yeah, which category are we going to exclude?
So the Irish Catholics, and. This tour, which is 90 minutes, it's a specialty tour. It's $29, and we're going to run it. We're not going to stop on July 4th next year. I mean, I think we'll run it for a good while. I think it's important to reflect on where we came from and how this little experiment started, because it didn't happen by accident, but it almost came off the rails. And I guess we do end up talking about the Civil War, because the American Civil War really put the founding of the nation to its greatest test.
And Lincoln said that at Gettysburg. He said, we are now engaged in a war testing whether a nation founded on liberty and conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. We're engaged in a civil war testing whether any nation so founded and so conceived can long endure. And that's exactly what we were doing in that war.
And I think we're also caught, we've talked about this on other episodes, we're caught between these tumultuous virtue signalers on both sides.
Right.
Okay, so we've got this sort of Confederado crowd that can't admit any of this because he's bad and he's a tyrant and slavery wasn't that bad and the Confederates are all brave, so they don't even want to have this conversation. And then on the other side, there's the sort of what I say are your hardcore leftists who are everybody back then was a white, rich racist.
Yeah, and we hear a lot of that in the modern day, looking back at them.
Right, and so, so they're white and they're rich, and they had all sorts of racial prejudices, but they're talking, this is an important component of this too, natural born equality. That's lost on, it was probably lost on a lot of people in 1776 who were I don't even know what that means. I think it's lost on people today because Jefferson referred to a creator. Newsflash, Jefferson's not a practicing Christian. He doesn't believe in the divinity, but he believes in God and a creator. And he believes that a creator made us equal. Beyond that, we're not. We have different intellectual capacities. We're different colors. We're different genders. We're all sorts of different. But there's one thing that is inseparable from the human spirit, and that is equality. He's a slave owner. Lincoln has a lot of racial issues. He's very uncertain that black people are his common law equal here on earth.
Yeah.
But he knows that slavery is wrong, and he knows what the document said. And I think that is something that we have to be able to tell people, because in this world of when I see these virtue signalers, it's absolutes. You have to be this or you have to be this. And these guys are working in this arena of, compromise and moderation and understanding that you can believe in two things or you can sort of walk and chew gum at the same time. And they're also thinking about the future.
Yeah, they're architects of the future. They're creating a future that doesn't exist yet, but they can see it.
Right. Well, there's a great scene. I don't know that he ever said the words, but in the Spielberg movie Lincoln, when he's talking about the millions yet unborn, that's very true. People like Jefferson were thinking about what the country might be in 50 or 100 years. Lincoln was thinking about, if we destroy ourselves in civil war, we can never mature. Right. We can never become what we were hoping to work toward. And maybe that makes the founding all that more special, because they're planting a seed at a time when the world was very different. You know, the world of 1775 was, a lot of people wouldn't recognize 1861, but 1775, where was any shining light of liberty and justice and, you know, equality? It didn't exist anywhere. The British Empire was probably the most benevolent, you know, of the major powers, but
yeah, you still at least had representative government there, but you still have a king on top of that.
Right, there's still a king.
Yeah.
It's not like today when the king's really the monarchy is a figurehead. He was, you know, quite powerful. And I just think this is in more than ever. The 250th is pretty important. I mean, we'll have existed for a quarter of a millennia, which is, you know, a lot longer than most of these other little experiments have ever lasted. And I remain convinced that we have a bright future, which is, I think, what happened in 1776 was thinking about, we can do what we can now, and this is about the future. But here's where we start. He brings us, and others bring us back to that position. You know, Lincoln, his moderate wing of the party banding together with abolitionists, the only way that the country was saved, and that we really go back to that central idea of equality. Today, there's a lot of people who are like, the country doesn't exist like it did. It was terminated as a result of the Civil War, and there was a new nation born. No, no. The only thing that changed is you couldn't own people. Yeah. We went really back to the beginning and sort of started over.
It's just a course correction to get us back in line with.
Right. So, what does the 250th mean? What does the 250th mean to people, you know, who maybe either don't live in this country or have never paid any attention to history, or maybe they've only lived here for 10 or 20 years? What does it mean to them? What is the experiment? What does it mean?
I think there's a reason that people still are trying really hard to come to this country from all kinds of places. And even when things are not perfect and we can even be contentious with one another, there's something about America and this commitment to freedom and equality, even when we do it badly, that still serves as a beacon, an inspiration, you know?
That's what I hope people get. If they take the tour, that's great. But as we reflect on, you know, the next year, because it's almost the 4th of July, and then it'll be 12 months, is to recognize that we live in a very special place. You know, I don't believe in the like American exceptionalism argument, but I also don't run the country down, because it has done tremendous things. This country actually has been very progressive in the big scope of things. It's just sometimes taken a long time to get there. Like, I was just writing for my new book about women finally getting the right to vote. And you see this surge in numbers between the 1916 election and the 1920 election. Like 18 million voters to almost 25 million. Well, that transforms the country, but that's one of those, you know, moments along the way. And yeah, would the founders have envisioned that women could vote? Yeah, probably not. But you had to start somewhere. And then he and others worked to save it. And now we're always fiddling around with, you know, what does it mean and where is it going to go? But I hope people reflect on, listen, if you don't like the country, you can always move. I mean, you really can.
It's easier to get out than to get in.
I mean, right. And I know some people in recent years, they have moved. But, you know, if you don't like it, you can always move to, I don't know, Canada. You can go to Mexico. You can go to Zimbabwe, probably Russia, China, Portugal. I mean, there's a lot of places you can live, and if you want to, that's cool.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's a reason I think that people want to come here. And I think some of those people who often come from some of the crummiest places that still exist in the 21st century. Maybe not so terrible. They've got the internet and they've got their they've got good food and running water and they have all the things. But the government sucks. The government is oppressive and doesn't allow them to speak out or is punitive or whatever. I mean, imagine living in Russia. Yeah. Ugh, yuck. To this day, ugh, And so I think there's something really special about this country and how it has tortuously sometimes evolved.
And these families, all the families whose stories we tell, that was their story. I mean, we have at each of our sites, we have somebody growing up right in the wake of, here at Ripaville, it's Nathaniel Chairs is growing up in the wake of the revolution. It's Randall McGavick at Carnton and
Francis
Carter at the Carter House. So that's the world they knew, and we get to watch those families evolve.
Yeah, they're kids.
Kids.
They're kids. I mean, Nathaniel's the oldest, and he's like 12 when the Declaration is signed. So, they're British in culture.
Yeah.
But they've become Americans, and then so they see the early history of the country unfolding. It wasn't history to them; it was their life. And so come out and do it. The tour's offered at what time? 9 and 12:30? Is
9 and 12:30, all 3 sites.
All 3 sites. You can
pre-book it or walk in.
Pre-book, walk in, along with a whole variety of other tours, house tours, battlefield tours, slavery tours. So we offer lots of tours. We do. That's what we do all the time. Talking about history. So, but take a moment seriously and think about what started, what had already started 250 years ago, and watch John Adams, the great HBO series, but based on David McCullough's book.
Right.
John Adams is the not sexy founder that everybody should take a moment to consider because he was very important and he was the second president of the United States.
And that series, you get to watch those guys wrestling with all of those ideas and exactly how we're going to craft the language and how to say things in the way that expresses most fully, but also is going to get buy-in from all those states because you got to get everybody to agree. You don't want it falling apart.
And Adams also makes a great point early on. He talks about that it's a country of law.
Yeah.
That there's a construct here that does protect us too from ourselves.
Yeah.
A constitution which guarantees rights, but laws on a lot of different levels. And yes, sometimes the laws are stupid and they later get changed. But it creates a sort of order and civility that has outpaced our darker side. And it has gravitated toward the better angels of our nature. So take a moment and, appreciate the country in which you live and all of its wonders and all of its benefits. Thanks, everybody.